King's Dominion is known to be a very nice park all around, and from first-hand experience, I can totally agree. I've been to quite a few parks, and King's Dominion is honestly one of the better ones. It's super nice, uses its space well, and has some great roller coasters, which is what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to rank all these roller coasters, worst to best. But before we start the video, just a reminder to like, subscribe, and follow the Instagram. It boosts my channel and it tells you when I post more quality content for you guys. Okay, let's state the obvious. Gray Pumpkin Coaster is easily the worst. It's the only kiddie coaster in the park, and it's a clone home to multiple parks, which doesn't help its case. This is an E&F coaster, and it's basically an oval with little hills. Nothing mind-blowing. This coaster isn't very important to talk about, so let's just move on. The runner-up for the worst, and the 12th spot, is Apple's Apple. Once again, nothing special about this coaster. It's a mock wild mouse with a height of 50 feet and a speed of 35 miles per hour. I don't know if I just got a bad ride on this thing, but it was running pretty rough and wasn't enjoyable. I don't like wild mice that much in general, so that probably explains it. Definitely not as good as its neighboring coaster. At our 10th spot, we have Woodstock Express, a wooden coaster that they have plenty of at the Cedar Fair parks. Honestly, I don't really mind Woodstock Express. Its max height is only 35 feet and goes 35 miles per hour, but the tiny pops of airtime here and there make up for it. Okay, now that the family and kiddie coasters are out of the way, these next coasters are a pretty big step up. Except for the next coaster. The next one kind of sucks. At the 10th spot, we have Endicon, the park's Aero Looper. I've been on a fair share of these models, and this one's probably the worst. Most of the transitions from element to element are really clinky, more than the others I've been on. There are 4 inversions and 2,700 feet of track. Endicon's top height is 144 feet, and it goes 50 miles per hour. Another problem for this coaster is that it has nothing special about it. The 3 inversions are basic elements that most of these Aero Loopers have. It's an old and forgettable coaster. I think it's time for King's Dominion to remove it for something way better. Grizzly is one of the more lame wooden coasters out there, which is why it's at the 9th spot. This Taft Attractions wooden coaster has a double out and back layout. Its top speed is 51 miles per hour and reaches a height of 87 feet. On this coaster, you take a ride through the forest area of the park. I rode this for the first time after the refurbishment from Gravity Group, and well, it was still nothing special. There weren't too many airtime moments, and when there was, they weren't very strong. I also found it super weird that the queue of the ride starts in a gift shop. It makes it confusing for first-time guests. At least the coaster's better than its twin at California's Great America. Now that coaster sucks. At 8, we have Backlot Stunt Coaster, which maybe the coaster would have been higher if it wasn't an exact clone from Kings Island. Same thing for the next coaster, which, spoiler alert, it's Flight of Fear. I get that these 2 parks are sister parks, both having an Eiffel Tower and similar names, but man, they don't need to have the exact same lineup. Okay, moving on from that. Stunt Coaster is a premier launch coaster, the starting launch being 0 to 40 miles per hour, which is pretty good for a family coaster. Then it proceeds to do 1,000,000 helixes, up to its max height being 45 feet. After most of the twists and turns, you go into the show scene, where about 50% of the time, there's music and fire goes off, launching you again into a dark tunnel, then boosts you out, which puts you back into the loading station. It has a weird layout, the cool part of the ride doesn't work half of the time, and the 2 different clones makes this coaster mediocre. And yeah, it has 2 other clones. I just didn't mention the one at Canada's Wonderland. At the end of the day, it's just a filler coaster, along as the next coaster on the list. This coaster being Flight of Fear, once again, a filler ride and a clone, which I'm not going to go on that topic again. But this coaster is much cooler. This is also conveniently a premier launch coaster too, but it's more intense, as the launch goes 0 to 54 miles per hour. The coaster's max height is 75 feet, which doesn't really matter because the whole coaster is enclosed. The coaster has 4 inversions, including a cobra roll and a corkscrew. The roller coaster is themed to Area 51 and aliens, which is pretty cool. During the coaster, there are colorful lights everywhere. The whole idea of this coaster is basically just a cheap copy of Rock and Roller Coaster. The coaster Poltergeist at Six Flags Fiesta Texas is almost a replica of this ride, but it is outdoor, and honestly, I prefer it that way. Finally done with the clones, we have Racer 75 in the 6th spot. This is a racing wooden coaster, implied by the name. Both right and left sides have the same stats, being 85 feet tall, having a top speed of 56 miles per hour, and having 3,368 feet of track. These stats honestly aren't bad for being a wooden coaster built in 1975. The coaster's main element is a variety with different hills. Big hills, small hills, bunny hills, 8 to be exact. 16 counting both sides. You get the point, it's a lot of hills. Despite this being an older coaster, and pretty tame compared to some others in the park, I really enjoy some of the airtime at times, and the racing aspect, which is executed really well, unlike some other racing coasters. Twisted Colossus. Another coaster on the tamer side, taking the 5th spot, is Reptalian. This is a super unique coaster, being a bobsled built by Mach. There are only 3 bobsleds left in the US, so I'm super glad I've gotten to ride one. Reptalian made its entrance in the park March 26, 1988, having a height of 69 feet and 1,900 feet of track. Something pretty interesting about the bobsled coasters is that it doesn't have an exact speed. This is because it depends on how much you weigh and what the weather is. This coaster has a family-friendly layout, having a lift hill, a helix, and some turns. Even with the bland layout, it's a pretty enjoyable ride. And as fun as an entertaining Reptalian is, it also has something I hate. During its mid-course brake run, it just stops completely. I don't know if all bobsleds do this, but I know this one does, and it's super annoying. But besides that, it's great. While editing this, I saw that the POV, it didn't stop during the brake run, so it probably just ran really bad for me that day. Kings Dominion's newest ride, that's actually built, Toombly, opened 2020, and it's an SNS 40 free spin. This means your seat can tilt freely 360 degrees, forwards or backwards. The coaster's top height reaches 112 feet, goes 34 miles per hour, and has 770 feet of track. But the main factor of these types of rides are the flips. Because it's on an axis, the flips are uncontrolled, so you get a different number of flips every time. I think the most I've heard about someone getting was 6. Just narrowly reaching the top 3, we have Dominator. This is a B&M floorless, and it's super ugly, like it's bad. But let's talk about that later. Dominator has a drop of 150 feet and goes 65 miles per hour, which isn't too shabby, but the length is what makes the coaster so good, having 4,200 feet of track. Dominator goes through 5 inversions after its drop. First, you go through a 135-foot loop. Then you do a horseshoe, which is a turn where you're at a 90-degree angle. You also have your classic Cobra Roll, which is on most floorless coasters. But one of my favorite elements on these types of rides are interlocking corkscrews, and Dominator happens to have one. It inverts you 3 times and is super aggressive. Also, just a random disclaimer that Dominator runs a little rougher than it looks, just so you know. Okay, now the reason why I think the coaster is ugly. Just to be honest, look at it. The orange and navy aren't a good combo at all, and I prefer Intimidator's yellow and red to be honest, which isn't good either. And they also randomly made the loop yellow, and that doesn't fit at all. It also really doesn't help that it's placed in a parking lot. I get it was moved from another park a while ago, but they could have done better. But being ugly doesn't affect the coaster, so it's not that big of a deal. Now in the number 2 spot, so close to number 1, we have Intimidator 305, which is easily one of the most aggressive coasters I've been on. Intimidator 305 is a giga coaster built by Infinite. If you don't know what a giga coaster is, it's a large scaled coaster that needs to be over 300 feet tall, and there's only 5 in the world. Now known as Project 305, which I'm definitely not going to call it that, reaches a top speed of 90 miles per hour, has 5,100 feet of track, and is 305 feet tall, hence the name. Now just by hearing the stats of this coaster, it already sounds insane. You can feel the speed throughout it. Every little turn feels like it's going to fly you out of your seat. And that's saying a lot, seeing how restricted the restraints are. You start off the coaster plummeting down the lift hill, which feels like it lasts forever. Then you take the element which the ride is known for, the helix. But it's not like any other helix. It's super down to the ground, lasts forever, and you take it super fast. You gray out for the entire helix, and maybe a little after, due to the 4.5 Gs it puts on you. After this, you go through hills and turns that really feels like it wants to eject you. Then you reach back to the loading station. I've had 6 rides on Intimidator. Front, back, middle, night, day, all the experiences. And I do think that this coaster is best in the front, so try getting it if you can. Twisted Timbers is manufactured by RMC, so you know it's going to be great. With a height of 111 feet and 3,060 feet of track, you know you're in for a ride. The coaster starts with a chain lift hill, which reaches to the drop, but this just isn't any drop. It's a drop with a barrel roll, which gives a super unique experience. Following the drop, you do in turn to 3 hills in a row. This coaster has 3 inversions, one being a 0G roll. This has to be some of the best airtime of almost any coaster I've ever been on. Even being Steel Vengeance, which is my personal favorite coaster ever, and having the record for the most airtime, I feel that Twisted Timbers is better. The end airtime hills remind me a lot of Magnums at Cedar Points. It's just the ejector after the ejector after the ejector. Also, the theming is pretty cool, with the truck at the entrance and the tractor in the queue. This coaster is one of my favorites of all time, which is why it's the best coaster at King's Dominion. Well, that basically wraps up the video. King's Dominion has a pretty decent lineup, despite all the filler coasters. And the park's really nice, which is a big bonus. Thanks for watching to the end. If you enjoyed it, you can like and subscribe, it helps a lot. Also, if you want some extra content, you can also follow me on Instagram. Anyways, that's all from me. See ya.